Good day, everyone. My name is Rafi Rowell Reyes, and today we are going to talk about the most highly highlighted topic in our current times, which is the Ukraine and Russia conflict, or also known as the war in Ukraine. So, for our topic today, or our discussion today, we're going to address two pointers, 2 points or questions. So, for our first question is, how do you factor in the role of NATO and EU in the current conflict? What can NATO and EU do to mitigate the effects of the ongoing feud between Ukraine and Russia? That's first. Second is, how can the international banking and financial system be utilized as a weapon of war in the Ukraine Russia crisis? What role will institutions like the WTO, the IMF, and the WB play in this area? So, before we're going to address these pointers, first let's have a look back on the war in Ukraine. So right now, as everyone know that it's already been a year, or like it's already been a year, yes, since Russia invaded Ukraine back in February 2022. And it really shocked the whole world, because after all, like prior to the invasion, there were already rumors, predictions, speculations saying that, oh, we need to be aware because uh, Vladimir Putin will invade Ukraine at any time now. People were then also predicting that the invasion could happen at the beginning of 2022. So that was January. But then it didn't happen. And along the way, up to February, because there were like the concern is there because there were already like satellite images already being seen that Russian military equipments like infantries, weapons, tanks, and other armored vehicles are already stationed near the border of Ukraine. So like the international community was alarmed by it because it poses a significant hint that Russia might just have a plan to invade Ukraine. But then prior to the invasion day, there were already behind the scenes there were already diplomats or diplomatic processes happening, trying to negotiate to Putin the don't invade, something like that. Putin on the other hand have been also at the same time were like denying, saying that, oh, I will not invade Ukraine. What I'm doing is just military exercises and something like that. But then, boom, news flash. The invasion happened and the world witnessed a large war in our modern times. It is probably the war in Ukraine is probably the largest ground war happened since the Second World War. So it was really a shock, and and to think that the war happened in the middle of a pandemic, and in the pandemic, the economy countries are affected, and now also, and to add fuel to the fire with this war, it's already adding up to the already huge problem that all of us are already facing in this world. So now, going back to the important pointers of the 2 pointers I just mentioned earlier. So let's first answer the first question. So I will read the question again. How do you factor in the role of NATO and EU in the current conflict. What can NATO or EU do to mitigate the effects of the ongoing feud between Ukraine and Russia? So, uh, first, before we're going to answer directly to this question, first, like, we need to know what is NATO. So, NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So, it is a military alliance consisting of the West, the United States, Britain, uh, countries like the Germany and something somewhere there. So it is a military alliance bent on protecting each other's territories. So there is this part in NATO's principles where when one attacks a single member, if a single member is being attacked, it is also a direct attack to all the members. So all the members will also respond swiftly. So it is really a very very massive alliance, military alliance. So that is NATO, and EU is the European Union, and it is consists of the European countries bounded together by a common principle in a organization. So how will NATO and EU mitigate the effects of the ongoing feud between Ukraine and Russia? Well, NATO and EU are are condemning Russia's actions in Ukraine because they don't really see war as a something that everyone wants, especially this time around where there is a global pandemic. And NATO on the other hand is they cannot directly help Ukraine, even though like they wanted to help, but they cannot do it directly, like aid, go there on the battlefield, because in the first place Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and if all NATO members are going to help Ukraine, of course, like it's going to make Russia uh, immediately lose. But the things that that the factors are there which prevents it, because even if NATO would do it, there is something that hinders them, and that is Russia's capabilities. Russia is also known to have the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the world, and it is a deterrent actually. Like when you think about it, it is a deterrent, so it is a threat. So Russia can use it if it feels caught up in the corner. So it is also not a good idea for all NATO members to help Ukraine and gang up against Russia, because it will really be a catastrophic idea to even do it. So what are NATO, EU, or the US is doing right now? Well, they are providing military assistance. They cannot send their own armies there because of course Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and even though Ukraine is being attacked right now, and Ukraine not being a member of NATO does not have the benefits of NATO's principality of mutual defense, where if a member is being attacked, then all it also signifies that it is an attack on all, so NATO members will gang up against the aggressor. But then unfortunately Ukraine is not a member of NATO, so it will not reap that kind of benefits. However, what the EU, the European countries, the US or NATO are doing are this: they are providing military assistance, such as sending equipments, tanks, aircrafts, training. These four types I just mentioned are very important because as we can see on the news just last year, starting September, I think it was around September, it states that Ukraine started to fight back. And of course, like when Russia launched the full scale invasion back in February, it was, they wanted to end it in a week. They wanted to end it as fast as possible, but then here we are now. It's been a year since then. So it was kind of a miscalculations, and because of that, it gave the Ukraine ample time to strengthen, train their soldiers. It gave the Western countries enough time to help and train the Ukraine soldiers. And look at look at the difference. They were able to push back the Russians on the lands and territories they occupy in Ukraine. And right now, they're being pushed back to the outskirts, or like the end border, near the border now between Russia and Ukraine. So to again, to directly answer this question, EU and NATO cannot, they can mitigate. They are putting sanctions on Russia in order to cripple its war machine, so that uh, in hopes that there would it would like dissolve or like eradicate the fundings of the war. So that's the only thing they can do for now, and also aid military assistance, something like that. It can also help in hoping to end the conflict. That is what EU, NATO, the Western countries, the US are doing right now, because they cannot directly be involved in the battlefield because it will pose a very threatening scenario if it ever happens, if it ever comes to that point. Now, the second question is, how can the international banking and financial system be utilized as a weapon of war in the Ukraine-Russia crisis? What role will institutions like the WTO, IMF, and WB play in this case? In this area, I mean. So, like I said, the international banking and financial systems are being used as a weapon of war, because this is the arsenal. This is the arsenal. The international banking. This is the arsenal the Western countries are using, because they cannot, like I said just now, they cannot be in the front lines of the battlefield. They cannot be, because even if they wanted to, they cannot, because it is, aside from NATO, not NATO, sorry, aside from Ukraine not being a member of NATO, it will probably push Russia into using nuclear weapons if ever the countries will gang up against Russia. So now, what is the alternate solution to that? Of course, there is the international banking and financial system. It can be used as a weapon of war. So this is where things like sanctions are being put into play. So the high government officials, oligarchs in Russia, have assets their assets in Western countries freeze, and because of this, it is hard for them to liquidate or move their assets. Now, you might ask, how is sanctions going to help? Well, to be honest, like putting sanctions on a country can be very scary at best, because yes, it can affect the elites, or the elites in the country, in a certain country. But what the very poor thing would happen is that the common people there are the ones who will be heavily affected of these sanctions. So when the US ordered to put sanctions into Russia, it really crippled the Russian economy. And it was a very good move, because it damages their fundings it damages the fundings they will have in the war. But the downsides of doing this is that, like I said, it affects the common people. So when doing sanctions, it should be a balancing act. Like, it should not be a very to the point where it's so harsh, where and innocent people, common people, will be the ones who will be heavily affected. So again, in the question number two, the international banking and financial system, institutions like the WTO, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank are being used or by ordered by countries to impose sanctions on Russia. This is a weapon, actually. This is a weapon, like without being hands on the battlefield. It's like an invisible hand kind of weapon, where 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 the efforts of doing this, the goal of this is to try to mitigate Russia by, because if they're going to make the economy bleed in Russia, then hopefully it would try to stop the war because there would be no funding anymore. So once again, that is my answers to the two questions for our topic today. And it is very sad. I am always watching of the current events, the current news in the Russia and Ukraine war. And it is very sad because people are dying, and it is really not a good sight to see. And I am hopeful that this conflict will be resolved soon and it will be end, because this is for the betterment to all of us. Once again, my name is Rafi Roel Reyes, and I thank you all for watching and listening. Thank you.